Speak to the Human is a podcast that explores how we build connections with people in their professional work. It's about the human experience at work and about how to foster that connection and belonging to support people and their organisations to flourish. I'm your host, Sarah Abramson, and I'm looking forward to you joining me in hearing from our brilliant guests. My guest in this episode is Ben Sawyer. Ben's background is working in bomb disposal and special operations in the British Army, and he now works as Head of Field Continuous Improvement at British Gas. In this conversation, he brings fascinating insights into a world most of us will never come close to experiencing, in bomb disposal in frontline military operations and war zones. But it also reveals a huge amount that is relatable and relevant to all of us around human responses to fear, risk tolerance, and how we can train our brains to handle fear, and how that relates to control. Ben shares what he's learned about himself and about leading teams from his experiences, and how a lesson in failure taught him more than previous successes. He shares what it's been like to transition from nearly 20 years in the army into a corporate environment, what his work in continuous improvement involves, and why mindset, empowerment, and leadership capability are key. Ben has so many incredible stories and insights. I really hope you'll enjoy listening. Please do like and share the podcast, and feel free to drop us a line with your thoughts. Hi Ben, I'm delighted to have you joining us on the podcast today. We met at a conference on operational excellence where you were chairing the morning session, bringing experiences in your current role as Head of Field Continuous Improvement at British Gas. And since then, we've talked more about your incredibly interesting and varied background in the military, working in frontline and special operations and specialising in bomb disposal. You've clearly got such valuable insights from bringing this work into the corporate sector. I'm really looking forward to digging into some of these topics with you. So welcome to the podcast.
That's great. Well, thank you for inviting me.
It'd be great to start with hearing a little bit about that background. I mean, can you sort of tell us about your career and give us the picture?
Yeah, sure. So I joined the army after university. I studied aeronautical engineering at university, and then went travelling basically until almost a traditional route into the army. I went travelling, ran up so much debt from travelling around the world and doing things that I had to join the army for death is prison. So kind of very 19th century sort of approach to the army. I did. I spent a year at Sandhurst, so officer training, and then joined the Royal Logistic Corps. I joined the army because I wanted to do bomb disposal. I wanted to do improvised device disposal, and that sits at the time it sat within the Royal Logistic Corps. So I spent a bit of time there doing logistics, and then went off to do my ammunition tech officers training, which is where all the bomb disposal sits. And that was great 'cause it's a 18-month course, I think, and it goes into a lot of the science and technology, and you spend a lot of time at kind of the military university at Trivenham, even making your own explosives and working with mathematicians on ballistics and all sorts of things. Absolutely fascinating. And then the more practical element of everything, and it's everything from how munitions are stored safely, how to investigate accidents, and then you also deal with how to deal with unexploded devices, leftover chemical munitions from the First World War and all sorts of things. So yeah, absolutely fascinating course. And after that, I joined 11 Explosive Forms Disposal Regiment. So that's the British Army's leading bomb disposal regiment at the time for dealing with counter-terrorism. And I spent a good part of my career there. So I had a troop in Germany to start with, and I did tours out in Northern Ireland and Iraq as a bomb disposal operator. So leading a team of dealing with improvised explosive devices. That's around, it's like Basra especially. Spent some time doing West intelligence there as well. So that's looking at how do you exploit devices. So when you recover them, when someone's rendered them safe, then recovering it for forensic and technical intelligence. Again, all brilliant experiences. And after I moved more into the special operations world. So I became the bomb disposal operator for various special operations teams. So looking at maritime counterterrorism, which is great. So you get to learn to parachute into the sea and all sorts of exciting things, and climbing up the sides of ships. But from there, I also did 4 tours as an operator with Special Operations Task Force, 3 tours in Iraq, in Baghdad. So that was hunting Al Qaeda, suicide networks, and then 1 tour in Afghanistan. And I guess they were highly informative because I learned so much from working in those networks and also seeing kind of great leadership and some poor leadership, which you learn from. And it was just, I guess that was kind of what I joined the army to do. That was kind of at the cutting edge of things. After that, I went on to command a squadron of pioneers. I did a couple of staff tours, kind of looking at how do we develop capability. But again, that's actually fascinating. So you're looking at what capabilities do the military need and what are the gaps and how do we develop it? And we were looking at everything from what do we need to give to the soldiers in 2 weeks' time through to what sort of capability do we need in 30 years' time, and funding kind of university research, a really blue sky stuff all the way up. And that absolutely fascinating, looking at all ends of the kind of technical readiness levels. So, and then, yeah, so when my first daughter was born, I decided to get out of the army. I left and went to work for Oxford University Press, ended up there as their head of operation improvement, and then moved over to British Gas a couple of years ago.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, so many questions coming out of that in my mind. Not least what a transition that was at the end of the army career. But I'm interested actually in what appealed to you in the first place about bomb disposal. You were obviously quite clear-eyed about what you wanted to do, and you had that ambition from the start. What was it?
So I come from a forces family. So both grandfathers were military. My father was RAF, so he was a navigator on Phantoms and Tornado. And when I was growing up, we were in the 80s, living out in Germany. There was a significant threat from the IRA, who were very active in the parts of Germany where we were living. And things like at school, we were taught how to search under a car because if you needed to go out and get a toy from the car, you needed to take out kind of search under the car before opening it. And that's it. I don't know, 6 or 7. You're learning those sort of skills. I remember at one point we had armed soldiers on the bus after the Americans bombed Libya because there was just again a threat to the British families out in Germany from potential Libyan attack, and it just seemed very normal. That's area where you learned about bombs and how to look for them, having soldiers on the school bus or kind of lurking in the bottom of the garden. And it's occasionally you would see the training element, so you would see the bomb disposal going on, either training or reactions to it. And then as you get older, you see the images from Northern Ireland, pick someone kind of that deserted street and someone walking down the road. They kind of appeal because I think I really enjoy a technical challenge. I've got an engineering degree and always as a kid who enjoyed pulling things apart, less so putting them back together. And yes, I think the element of that technical challenge and also that there's one person out there doing it by themselves and could I do that? So I wanted to see if I could.
I mean, for most of us, it's an utterly terrifying concept, and the idea of doing it yeah, it's really scary. I'm interested in I know that you've talked a lot about your concept of risk and of fear. How do you think those experiences have shaped your attitude to risk? Or what your attitude was in the first place that kind of appealed to you about going into that field?
I think my attitude to risk was probably formed a long time before that. Um, I think I was very lucky. I had very trusting parents, and so I don't know if you've ever seen Bluey. There's a wonderful episode where Bluey's dad is telling his kids about when he was in the 80s. And he describes going out on the bike, and he's not wearing a helmet, and the kids are shocked. Like, where have you? Here's the 80s, man. And I guess he's going up there, and I read things like I think I was what about 11 or 12. And my parents let me and my friend go off for 2 or 3 days cycling through Holland, camping
Wow,
by ourselves.
wow.
Now, I can't imagine getting a kid nowadays don't
No,
do
it's
that.
really changed.
So I think attitudes have changed. But my parents have brought me up kind of with that idea of gradual exposure risk, and so they could trust us to go and do that. So I think right from the start, I kind of had a healthy appreciation of risk and how you control it. And then got heavily into adrenaline sports. So all through school and university, whitewater kayaking. After university, I spent 5 months in Nepal, kayaking some of the biggest rivers there, doing lots of mountaineering, ski racing, and things like also speed riding. So kind of skiing down a mountain with a parachute on, so you can then ski off
Oh,
cliffs and things like
wow.
that. So again, all sorts of adrenaline sports, which they, although people look at things and skydiving as well, um, but again, they're all about controlling the risk. So if you see people about to jump out of a plane, there's a lot of control going into it. So people will pack their own chutes, so you know it's right. You're checking your own gear before you get on, then someone else is checking it. Then before you jump out, again, you're checking each other's gear. You carry within your pack, there's a spare parachute if the first one fails. There's also an automatic release so that if you're unconscious. So again, there's people perceive it as that really high risk thing to do, but people are doing it and no, you often find are very controlled about risk. So things like I do all those adrenaline sports, but the concept of doing a bungee jump terrifies me because I'm not in control of the risk.
Right.
You're jumping off there on something prepared and controlled by someone else
Right.
of unknown levels of training and then levels of competence.
Right.
So I think, yes, I enjoyed adrenaline sports. I enjoyed taking all the risk, but again, it was all about how do you control it? And then, so it's things like looking at, I mean, risk, it's a function of kind of the likelihood of something happening and the impact of it if it occurs. So what do you do to reduce the likelihood of it happening? And what do you do to reduce the impact of it? So things like you wear a helmet, wearing a helmet doesn't change the likelihood of something, but it reduces the impact if something does go
Mm.
wrong.
Mm.
And again, all the way through my military, that was, I guess I understood that as a gut instinct growing up as a kid and kind of then through adrenaline sports. But then when I started going into bomb disposal, you start learning that a lot more formally about kind of the concepts of kind of probability and impact and how do you control the probabilities and mitigate the impact.
Mm. It's so fascinating, and, we'll talk in a moment about, army training to prepare you for that, but I'm so interested in that sort of attitude about controlling the risk and what's going on there, and because clearly there's a thrill-seeking element, I think, to those extreme sports and adventure sports and that kind of thing, so it's sort of enjoying the fear, presumably, that you're putting yourself into, but a sense of controlling the risk. That's fascinating in itself. I wonder as well if there's some sort of element of psychology in the sense of control and to what extent that might change in different situations where you feel like you've controlled it as being as important as whether you actually have controlled for it. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that feeds into so fear. It has the two elements of fear. One is the kind of the physiological reaction that you get to some form of threat to your body or your emotions. So you kind of get the fear of the car suddenly turns towards you and heading towards you. You got that fear kind of physiological reaction. But actually, I think I was looking at when I did a talk a couple of years ago on fear and dealing with fear, and especially around change. I was doing some research into causes of fear. So I think this was about 3 years ago, and the research was showing that the most common cause of fear and phobia in UK is height, and the second most common is public speaking.
Huh. Wow.
So unless you've got a really hard audience who are going to be throwing beer bottles, like there's no physical threat to public speaking. So it's that fear of emotional damage, which leads to the fear of there. So, but again, any form of fear, there's a physiological reaction, which is kind of where you start sweating, breathing hard, pupils dilating. Everyone would have felt it. But then there's the emotional reaction. So the physiological reaction is common to everyone. And you can do things to try and control it. So you can do things like around you, how practicing breathing and things like that to control the physiological reactions. But the emotional reactions is personal to everyone. And everyone's are different. And you'll get people who watch scary movies. Now, I don't particularly like scary movies, but some people love them. And again, it's they've got that emotional link for it makes them excited. It makes them happy to see that sort of thing. My emotional reaction or fear for things like skydiving and whitewater kayaking is I really enjoy it. It's a rush, whereas other people actually hate it, and it's just a completely different kind of everyone's psychological reaction to fear is different. I think the part of that is probably I haven't really considered about is how you tie it in with the level of control. So, yes, quite potentially, my psychological reaction to fear is linked up to my under control. But actually thinking about it, yeah, probably I don't think I would enjoy a type of fear that comes from not when I'm not in control.
Yes.
Going back to the bungee jumping idea, it's just I just
Someone
couldn't do
else
it.
doing it. Whereas I could imagine that another person might feel more confident, feeling like someone experienced has taken control of those risk elements and that you're sort of under expert guidance. So I could imagine it being perceived a different way.
Yeah, I think it also links to people have different fears and And I guess your reactions to different elements are very personal. So, for example, I absolutely love the fear that comes from maybe the adrenaline rush from adventure training, from kind of adrenaline sports, and doing bomb disposal. Again, there were often, I mean, often the time, yes, the adrenaline is going, but often you're too busy to be scared. And often it comes afterwards when you're kind of coming down off that adrenaline high and you realize the risk of it, especially some of the really dodgy situations. But you're normally too busy to be afraid at the time, but the fear comes afterwards.
How does the army training prepare you for those situations?
I think it varies. So one of the things the army does a lot of is adventure training. Years ago, there was the adverts of kind of Where's Frank, and it shows him off skiing and kayaking and stuff like that. And people often perceive it as army going off taxpayers' dollars, kind of
Having fun,
off
yeah.
on a jolly. And to be honest, sometimes it is for those who enjoy that. But it is there for a reason because it's difficult to teach people the fear of combat by putting them in a situation and shooting at them. You can't really do that. So you need to put people in situations where they are going to be exposed to their fears and have to learn not necessarily face those fears, but learn how to face any fear and control their emotions, control their physiological reactions in a situation that is controlled. So things like climbing, whitewater rafting. So exposing soldiers to fear, and how do they control it? But also the other thing about adventure training, it's great for team building as well. So if you are working together as a team to get down a river or to get up a rock face and things like that. So again, it's that team building element, the leadership element. So it's really useful across so many elements. But that exposure to fear is very useful. I think what was often lacking in the training was teaching people the theory of fear and the control of fear and the mechanisms to control it so that they can actively practice it in those situations. So it was things that some adventure training instructors did, some didn't. It wasn't as universal as it perhaps should be.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I can imagine that those situations where you're exposing people to fear, it's going to be so individual, the psychology and the depth of the difference between somebody's immediate reaction, their response in the situation, but also going more deeply into what's going on behind that for different individuals. And
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, it'd be fascinating to understand a little bit about how you experience that in a team situation and whether you see different people responding in different ways over time and how that comes together. And if some people might initially seem like they're coping really well, but actually there's something underlying that comes out later. And just
Yeah.
absolute fascinating
But
depth there.
so and also people's perception of what's going on. So, for example, I mean, there was a friend of mine. He was a much more experienced operator than I was when I was starting out. I guess he was the generation before. So he was one of my instructors and kind of mentors, and very experienced bomb disposal operator. Done all sorts of tours, really kind of high threat situations, and then we went off climbing, and I think his feet were about 3 foot off the floor, and his knees were shaking. He was frozen. And almost couldn't function. He was on a run, but he could just couldn't turned off and jumped from there. But his perception of the fear was just so out of it that he was just so scared of heights. And it by no means kind of this was a person who dealt with fear or kind of multiple times a day out in Iraq and Northern Ireland, things like that. So people are scared of different things in different situations. I think the other thing is seeing how people develop. I guess it's so what we're trying to do in adventure training is fear inoculation. And I think when I was preparing for doing this talk, where there's so much I knew I had in my mind about fear and risk, just as background knowledge and just almost instinctual that had been built into me and practiced over the years, that when I was putting this talk on fear together, that I started really thinking about what I'd seen and why we did it. And a few months before I was doing the talk, my youngest daughter had I think she just turned 3 or maybe just turned 4, and she was suddenly just big enough to go and do one of these treetop things where they go around and get tied on. And we went up and we were doing the first kind of crossing, and she was almost paralyzed with fear. She got her knees shaking and stuff like that. Within 10 minutes, she was running across these things, lifting her legs up, zipping across. And it was there in a really concentrated kind of 10-minute gap, kind of 30-minute gap of fear inoculation. She'd gone from being terrified to, this is the best thing ever. Can we do it again? Now, everything with kids happens at kind of hyper speed, and it takes those shortcuts. It's like teaching kids to ski; they have no fear. And we started teaching adults to ski, and one thing that got further to fall, but the fear is there. So yeah, I think fear inoculation, and you see that. And I was a kayak instructor, and one of the great things was taking people on expeditions out to the Alps and things like that, and seeing people develop and how they would face that first little drop off where you've got the water's accelerating and then will go through a little drop off a rock. And you can see them really panicking the first one. And then kind of towards the end of the week, they're pushing over these things and they're facing their fears and they're dealing with it. And seeing people develop like is absolutely brilliant. And that's one of the nice things about being an instructor. I think where it can get on top of people, and I guess this is still, I think, one of the elements of leadership I'm probably least proud of. I was leading a weapons intelligence team out in Iraq, and I had a whole bunch of my team who were going out on the ground on a daily basis, often coming under fire, like facing all sorts of threats. I also had parts of the team who were based in the operating base, so they never left. But there was the risk of rocket fire, so we were getting rocketed a couple of times a day. But again, although the threat was there, so we were getting rocketed, it's a huge area. So the actual risk, the likelihood of it affecting you was so small. But one of my intelligence analysts just didn't deal with that. And the stress levels had built up so that when he went on leave, he didn't come back because he just built up the perception of the risk being so high. And I hadn't caught this. So I've been kind of really looking out for elements of stress within my teams who are going out on the ground. And it didn't occur to me that for me it wasn't a factor. Kind of the rocket fire just wasn't. It's just daily life, and it didn't occur to me that that would be a problem for other people. And yeah, to this day, I still remember it, kind of the shame of I didn't pick up on that.
So hard though, isn't it,
Yes.
to know what's going on inside another person's mind and how they're actually experiencing fear and how real that is
Yeah.
for them. It seems like there's a real gap, and particularly in that environment between real actual risk and perceived risk. But
Yes.
the perceived risk can be experienced as something extremely real for that person, and they'll still have the psychological processing as much as if they were in a actually more dangerous situation. I mean, is that what was going on there?
Yeah, I think there's that, and it's. I mean, I had someone explain to me what it's the difference between fear and anxiety, and they can feel very similar. But the fear is based on a actual kind of there's a risk here and there that you're facing, whereas anxiety is there's potentially a risk. So it's that you're walking down the street, a dark street, and the anxiety is something that could happen. Whereas then you see a figure emerging, and then that becomes like red crosses over the fear. And I think that's kind of it's always quibbling a bit because if they feel the same, I kind of see it is the same, but apparently psychologically it is different. Yeah, so I think yeah, it is different for everyone. And I think where it becomes problematic is you've got the physiological reaction to fear where kind of it ramps up the senses, it's sort of heightened awareness, the kind of breathing, kind of maybe the muscles getting the extra energy, kind of almost all shaking, ready to go, ready to do something. It's like a classic fight or flight reflex. Where it becomes a problem is afterwards is if you can't come down from that. So if you, I think it's called the parasympathetic reaction. It's something like that anyway. And it's basically when your body then comes down and it's that feed and rest thing. So you're coming down, the adrenaline's being flushed out the system, you're calming down, you're taking kind of control of the situation. You come down off that adrenaline high. And I think some people get so that they can't do that. And that's where the stress of it becomes overwhelming and you can't maintain that level of stress over long periods. So I think part of it is learning your body consciously and unconsciously learning how to come down off that, come down from that fear reaction. And yeah, so I mean, things that you can do to help that. So things like exercise, eating healthily, lots of sleep. It's just all the things that people shake out all the time, but it does work. I mean, the number of times where you come back off a hard mission, you'd be absolutely exhausted. But the number of people who still go to the gym or go to the gym as soon as they get up. I mean, part of it is maintaining fitness. It helps you out on the ground when you're on operations, and fitness is very important. It helps you run places quickly with lots of weight. which is obviously important when someone's shooting at you. But also that the exercise, it helps deal with kind of the emotions.
That's so interesting. So, and going back to what you were saying before about when you are going into a bomb disposal situation and you're almost presumably at that point, you're so highly trained that you are working from a process and you understand exactly what you've got to do. So, and but then you were saying sort of it's afterwards that that emotion can be experienced more vividly.
I guess working the process, yes and no. So it's slightly different now, but when I was operating, we had the concept of joint service operator where you could work in controlled environments. So in UK, where the police could hold a cordon, normally the device that you see is the device you've got, and it's normally targeting other people. So often quite simple. There's no real kind of speed element to it, apart from returning situation normal, kind of if the centre of the town's blocked off. But then we'd have the high threat element, which is places like Iraq and Afghanistan, where you can't necessarily hold a cordon. People might be shooting at the cordon when you're doing it. The device you see isn't necessarily the device you've got. So there might be, it wasn't uncommon to find another device underneath it or within it to try and catch out the person dealing with the device. There might be other devices next to it. So it might have multiple devices around there. And by nature, they're improvised explosive devices. So although they're often quite common design, so you often see the same sort of design popping up, everyone will be slightly different. So you could, although we had our set procedures, our standard operating procedures, in a joint service environment, but you're a less experienced operator, you're expected to stick to those. If you wanted to go away from that, you had to ask permission, basically, from a more experienced operator. Whereas Iraq and Afghanistan, you wouldn't have access to that experienced operator, so you needed the experience and the knowledge to be able to know when to follow the rules and when to break them. It's that whole Douglas Bader quote. I don't know if you Douglas Bader, so World War II fighter race. He said, "What rules are for the guidance of wise men and the obedience of fools."
Yeah, I like that. Great quote.
So when I started working in with the special operations teams, so working down in Basra, I was leading a bomb disposal team. So I had a whole team of people behind me to help me think and help me deal with the kit and help deal with the device, and very much a team activity. Whereas in Baghdad and Afghanistan, I was the only operator attached to the special operations team. So just know you don't have a team there of operators to help you work with things. It's basically you deal with what you've got on your body. You don't have a robot with you. You've got what you've got in your pouches and on your rucksack. So there you had to be even more experienced to do that. And you had more advanced training for dealing with it because you're often having to deal with devices by hand, or often having to make up render safe procedures on the spot because you've got to deal with what you've got with what you've got.
This might be impossible to answer, but do you know which of those situations you found more stressful? Whether you're on your own and only really have yourself to think about, or whether you've got a team of people that adds to the risk, but also is there for support and input on decision making in the moment?
I think dealing it with by myself was more stressful, and often for different reasons. So although there was down in Basra, I had a team who I was kind of responsible for their safety as well. But when I was dealing with the device, we could always have people well away from it. So when we were exposed to risk from the device, it was only me being exposed to it. So I could leave my team kind of 50, 100 meters back and we could clear the area so I could deal with it, hopefully with the robot to start with. But again, it's one person risk. Whereas often in Baghdad, I'd be dealing with dangerous situations on the target when everyone's still around me because you're having to deal with it live, sometimes during an assault, and people are stacked up just behind you. So if you get it wrong, it's not just you, it's everyone around you. So the stress there, and you haven't been able to use a robot first. It's often dark. There's often shooting going on around, or sometimes having to do it with night vision goggles. So again, yeah, a lot more stressful. There's a lot more pressure on you to do it fast.
What an incredible situation to be in. What do you what do you think you learned about yourself and about leading other people from those situations?
I think even to get myself into that situation, I think one of the big things on there was how to learn. So all through school, university, I I found things came very, very easily to me. I could do the bare minimum work and get good grades. And that happened all the way through. And it was everything all through the ammunition tech officers course. Again, I worked hard, but I could do the minimum amount of hard work and get the good grades. And I never really failed at anything. And then I went on my first high threat operations course, which was to qualify me to work in Iraq or Afghanistan. And I failed it. And I'd been in the army, nearly 5 years by then. And it was the culmination of this is what I want to do. This is what I joined the army to do. So my entire career up to that point of being focused on, I needed to pass this course. I failed it. And the first time I really failed anything of significance. And that was a real shocker because I treated it the same as I treated everything else. Success had always come fairly easily. And I think I grew up a lot from that. So going back on the next course and really focusing and really kind of making sure I learned and dedicating all my time to it. So yes, I think from that, I one thing I learned to fail and have pick yourself up from, have I just wasted the last 5 years of my life? But yeah, to pick yourself up, dust yourself off and get back to it and work much, much harder to achieve what I wanted to achieve.
It's so interesting. It's a theme that comes up again and again, and was the focus in part of the Speak to the Human event that we had this year is the significance of failure, permission to
Mm.
fail, giving yourself permission to fail,
Yes.
and allowing others room for failure, but how vital that is as a really meaningful, effective way of learning and understanding things.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd obviously I failed small things before. I mean, no one's
Sure.
perfect.
Sure.
Obviously, I failed lots of other things before, but I never failed anything that was career changing, kind of so vitally important to what I wanted to do in my
Yeah,
life.
yeah. And interesting that you pick up on that as being something that feels like an inflection point for you as a different way of kind of learning and reflecting and taking that forward.
And it stands you up. So dealing with that element, I don't know if it's a song or some of that whole thing of when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. I was from Oxford University Press. I was made redundant from there, and again, it was kind of it's devastating, and it's the first time I'd faced that. So yeah, obviously, give yourself a few hours to grump about it, feel sorry for yourself, and then get on with life and kind of find something else. And I mean, actually, it was through public speaking that I think I landed this job now at British Gas. So about a month after being made redundant, I was chairing a another operational excellence conference in London. And in the first break, one of the continuous room directors from Centrica was there, so the parent company to British Gas, and he came up during the first break and said, "I've got a job with your name on it if you
What a
want it."
fantastic situation to find yourself in at just the right time.
And that's why I would always recommend people, and I think I said it at the conference you were at, that I recommend it to anyone there who hasn't spoken at a conference. Get out, find an opportunity and
Yeah, yeah,
speak at a conference. It's great for your confidence. It makes you really think about what you do and how you do it. And you never know when it's going to be useful in terms of kind of networking.
absolutely. I completely agree. It's so interesting. It's sort of going back to that point you were making earlier about different perceptions of fear and things that people are scared of. I mean, I actually quite enjoy public speaking. It's not that I don't get nervous of it, but I quite enjoy it. Whereas I'm known in my family for being absolute scaredy cat of watching anything, even like my level of threat for watching something on TV it ends about with the Great British Bake Off. Beyond that, I'm kind of like too much. Whereas public speaking and some, outdoor adventure sports, I'm like, yeah, bring it on, I love it. But then let's talk a little bit about that move into out of the army and into working in corporate roles. How did that feel? How did you draw on those experiences into kind of shaping the work that you do now and that sort of transition into a really, really very different environment?
I think it was difficult. I think there's a couple of the big elements was as a kind of doing both as an ammunition technical officer. That was my identity. That's who I was. So to the extent where on operations, kind of my call sign and even my name out in like Baghdad, Afghanistan was ATO. If you would ask go around the task force, say, is Ben around? Who the hell is Ben? It's go name is ATO. If I just written on your arm, it's kind of. I mean, I've still got a glasses case somewhere. If I ATO written across it, that was. So if I lost my glasses case, you'll know who to bring it to. And you get so highly tied up in it identifies what you do, who you are, but you work so hard to get there, and it influences your friend group. I mean, still some of my closest friends are from that fraternity, the ATO fraternity. So suddenly it's kind of I've left there. I'm not that anymore. I'm now just another person working in a corporate world, and trying to kind of reconcile that was difficult. The other element was that feeling of belonging. So I found it very strange. I got so used to it in the military. If you're single, you live in the block or the officers' mess with all the other single people. You work together, you play together, you go off on holiday together. Sometimes you go out drinking together. If you're married, lots of people live on basically what it's called the patch. So you're living in military accommodation, surrounded by military families, often from the same regiment. You have kind of work dues, often involving family. So really frequent to have wives and girlfriends or husbands and significant others all involved. You have kids events, so it's really as a whole kind of a whole family thing. And then suddenly get into the corporate world where that just doesn't happen. And when you have those conversations in the army around how's your family, especially when you're operations, it's a really meaningful thing because, especially within your team, because if someone's got a family problem at home, saying is how's it affecting them as on operations. And also, you've got you're living and working with these people and facing the same threats, and kind of it brings about that real kind of levels of empathy. Whereas you get into the corporate world, and it's especially now that people live all over the place because of remote working, asking after family is more. It feels like more of a politeness, and no one's met each other's families. You don't have those events. You don't. So people don't bring their whole self to work. It's very much you've got that work self and your home self. And I think I struggled with that. You don't feel like you've got that belonging. So, yeah, so it's that lack of identity, finding a purpose as well. I think organizations are kind of latching onto that element of what's the organizational purpose, and I think it's great that it binds things together. But how much of it do individuals actually feel is driving them as a person? In the military, I certainly felt it, and not everyone feels it, but I certainly felt it as that feeling of belonging and that feeling of we had a purpose, especially when we were kind of out of operations in Iraq, Afghanistan. And then that leads to, well, what happens when that purpose fails? Kind of when things like the Taliban take back over control of Afghanistan, the purpose of what we were doing there, what we felt, and how we colleagues, kind of friends and colleagues, didn't come back. And that's difficult. But yes, I think changes to the environment was a struggle. But yeah, you adapt and you get on with it.
I suppose the emotional presence, the emotional intensity that you're experiencing in the army is a completely different world, a different level from most people are going to work to do a job. And if you are engaged with your job, you care about it, you care about the outcomes. And if you're working for an organization that cares about its people and does that well, then you'll be more engaged. But it's a different level, isn't it, when you're in that intense environment where you are seeing and you're losing colleagues and you're experiencing things together that are life changing. It's a different level of sort of being present in your work. And I suppose it's really interesting hearing you talking about purpose, because I think that exists on an organizational level and a personal level, but there's so many organizations where they talk about purpose and they'll have values on the website. And sometimes when it's done well, their values are more lived and more experienced. And maybe even there's some level of engagement with listening to how people are experiencing those. But it feels different in the environment that you're talking about in the army. That intensity is just present in a completely different way.
But not it's not unique. I mean, you get other elements, so, first responders, so fire, police. I mean, you just have to look at what the NHS, and medical staff around the world were going through with COVID, and you see a lot of reaction there. You get people living together in dangerous environments on things like, offshore platforms and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's not unique to the military. A lot of people face it.
Yes, I suppose I'm putting myself in your shoes of going from straight into a kind of private sector corporate environment must have been really sort of discombobulating and, yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's very different, and I think it also didn't help the starting Oxford University Press, which it was a nice place to work, but not very. It doesn't really attract veterans. So I
Right.
think there's probably only 2 other veterans there, in the office,
Oh,
whereas
okay.
now I'm working at Centrica and there are hundreds, and they one of the things I actually really I enjoy about Centrica is they have a very active kind of forces program for recruiting veterans. So they have people within the HR team who are dedicated to going out and kind of bringing veterans in. They run the placements where veterans can come and spend some time, almost like an paid internship. And a lot of them will
Interesting.
end up with jobs there. The number of it almost seems every other meeting you're in with another veteran, which is it's quite nice. Is that
Yeah,
more of a feeling
interesting.
community and other people have done it. So it's also nice working for a company who are actively going out their way to help veterans.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about what continuous improvement means as a role and how you've been able to bring in some of those things that you learned from the army environment, and particularly around risk, what that means in terms of how you work now and how you kind of apply some of those concepts?
Yeah, sure. So continuous improvement, ironically, actually, it's one of the least risky ways to do change. Because you look at the number of big transformational changes where people invest years of work, millions of pounds, huge teams, and things then run over, they go horribly wrong. So, I mean, the classic is few people doing kind of SAP implementations or things like that, where as often not, they go horribly wrong after huge amounts of investment. So, yeah, highly risky. Whereas the nice thing about continuous brute is it's iterative and you're often looking at small iterative changes. So if something goes wrong, if the change isn't right, well, it's only a small change, then you undo it. And often you end up in the same place through these, but you've taken lots of iterative small steps to reach that end point rather than one great giant leap. And I guess in bomb disposal, we were doing continuous route all the time across the military, but I never heard of lean or Six Sigma or anything like that. But we did have kind of that instinct of you've got to improve. We have a stopwatch. We're always doing training iterations. So things like with my team and down in Basra, if we weren't out on the mission, then we were normally either maintaining kit, playing a bit, or going out and training. And after every mission and after every training series, we would have a hot wash of what went well, what didn't go well, what we were going to change. And then often people would go away, make those changes, come back, we rehearse those changes. And if it worked, it was good, then it became our new standard operating procedures. And sometimes you go through that cycle several times a day. So yeah, really quick cycle. Whereas when I left, part of my retraining, I did some Lean Six Sigma courses, and suddenly discovered that actually this continuous to was a thing, and there were lots of ways to better understand it and try to reach better ideas and better control what gets implemented. And I now look back at what we did, thinking like Basra, and I think, well, actually, even if I know Lean Six Sigma there, we probably would have reached the same places, but we may have got there a bit faster with all these tools. But we had that mindset and that determination we were going to improve. So now when I run foundation courses and I really emphasize that the most important thing is the mindset, that determination that treating every process as flawed and that nothing is perfect. You can always make it better. And that leads on to the idea of kind of marginal gains. So I guess the most famous case of that is in the UK, is probably British cycling, where they went from, I think, virtually zero gold medals in the Olympics through to owning it. And then also you had the Beast Class B team kind of dominating the Tour de France for years. And there was no one thing in there. It was all those tiny little marginal gains that all added up to kind of hundredths of a second here and hundredths of a second there. And then the next big thing is empowerment. So you've got to know that you can go and make these changes. Now, whether or not you are um, empowerment is not one. You often hear, and I've heard this in quite a few places where leaders say, yes, everyone's empowered to go off and do these things. But are they really? Because when someone goes and gets a change, it's like, oh my God, you did what? Kind of bang, 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 good spanking. And it's people don't feel empowered. So the main thing about empowerment is people got to know in their heart that they can do these things, and that also that their leadership will back them up. And kind of that idea that if things go wrong, it's not about punishing; it's about coaching. It's what did you learn from that? So as long as people don't make the same mistake again, that's fine. Go off and find an interesting new way to screw up.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's back to that sort of failure point, isn't it? And in that circumstance, the permission to fail. It's the
Mm.
understanding that it's okay to take ownership, to try something, to push the boundaries of what you're doing, because if it goes wrong, then your leaders, you're not. on your own. You're not isolated. You've been given that room.
I haven't worked in a tech startup, but I read a lot, and a lot of the case studies you read around from tech startups is that they do have that. They have those behaviors where failure is something you learn from, and you pivot from that and go carry on. Whereas I think a lot of the bigger, older companies, especially when you've got more formalized hierarchies and processes dating back into history, it's a lot harder to do that and face
Mm.
to have those behaviors. If you have an established hierarchy where you have different levels of manager going up, those different levels have to justify their existence. So you then have those levels of, well, we're going to put authorization for spend down to here. We're going to put, so this level can approve this amount of spend, this level can approve this amount. To make this change, you've got to go up to this level. So again, that immediately, as soon as you've got formalized hierarchy, it's really difficult to implement those behaviors where people can experiment and make decisions
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, there's a couple of different things going on there. So that leadership thinking, leadership culture, I suppose, where you've got hierarchy, but how do you then enable and empower people and create that environment? And then aligned with that, what you were saying about mindset is so interesting. I'm interested in how what you've learned about instilling mindset and different ways of thinking and what's worked, do you think, or hasn't worked?
First of all, going back to the how do you lead to empower people like that? So the British Army leadership doctrine they use mission command. So this came out of the 19th century when armies were getting so big that you couldn't have a general standing on a hill controlling a whole army. So the Prussians started developing this idea that you tell people what you want them to achieve, then they go off and achieve it. And that became formalized over the years, and it was adopted by the British Army. The idea is that you give people a mission that you want them to achieve, and you tell them your intent. What are you as a leader trying to achieve? Give them the context, and then set them free to go off and do it. And you may set bounds. So you might give them what they can kind of do left or right, or where how far to they can go to. And then you as a leader is about how can you provide the resources, how can you provide the backup for them to achieve what you want them to achieve. But that's very much built on trust. And the army builds those levels of trust by everyone working to that same doctrine and then training for it. Because if you're not off in a war, in a combat zone, then you're training. And most companies don't have that. They've got a day-to-day job on. They don't have the luxury of spending kind of months and months on training or so that everyone has this similar way of leading and building those levels of trust between kind of leaders and followers and the different levels of leadership. So I think it's a lot harder in a civilian organization. And also civilian organizations tend not to invest as much in leadership as military do. Your first year in the army is at Sandhurst, where it's pretty much 12 months, or sorry, 11 months of leadership training. And then you keep on getting leadership training, mentoring, and coaching, kind of formal and informal, all through your career. So you keep getting extracted for various leadership courses and you get lots of extra training. Again, civilian organizations can't, it's very rare where they can afford to extract people from the business for months at a time
Mm.
to train them in leadership.
It can feel that those things happen by fortunate circumstances where it's more dependent on someone having leadership capabilities and bringing that in with them and having the aptitude, the emotional intelligence to be good leaders rather than it sort of being supported, developed, created.
I think that's why I mean, certainly in America, that's it. I recognize in the corporate world around a lot of big companies have very big veteran recruitment programs. So people like Amazon, they recruit huge numbers of veterans, especially in the US, and they're not doing it for charity. They're there to make a profit, and it's recognizing that the veterans bring years of free leadership training and
Interesting.
experience.
Yeah, yeah. So and then just going back, the second part of that question was about how you can create and instill mindset in people that you're working with, perhaps within a team.
I think the biggest thing is example. So actually setting the example of how you want people to behave and giving people the opportunity to practice it. So, for example, when I took over my team down in Badger, one of the training cycles we were going through, we were looking at if I was injured down in the target, what would my infantry escort do to come and get me? And they told me that they would drive up in one of their Land Rovers, and two of them would kind of provide covering fire or watch the arc to make sure the area was safe, and two of them would grab hold of me in my bomb suit and pull me up and lift me up into the back of the Land Rover. Now, the back of the Land Rover was about the floor of it, about thigh height, narrow door. At the time, I weighed about 85 kilos, so boots and clothing probably about 90 kilos. The bomb suit was about 45 kilos. So, right, so the two of you in your combat gear are going to lift me and all that weight, that what 130, 135 kilos plus of weight. Right, I put the suit on, I lay down, right, lift me in there, and they couldn't, and they got the third person around. I think with three of them, they couldn't do it. They're like, go away, figure out how we're going to do this. So they got my spare suit, and so I pretty much knew how I could solve that, but I didn't. I asked them to go off and solve it. And the next day they'd come back and actually they'd come up with exactly the same thing as I thought they should do.
What was it?
Basically, they set up a pulley system attached to the front of the compartment at the back, and there was ropes on there, and then to a strop. And the strop they could loop around under my arms with a carabiner on there, and then they could
Okay.
just pull on the pulley, and that would just lift me up into it. So basically getting the pulley system using mechanical advantage. And then they'd also come up with an emergency one where they could put the strops and just attach it to the tow hook and then tow me down the road in an extremis. The suit would protect you against the road. We didn't practice that one. Yeah, so and they solved it, and that was great. So again, it's like setting an example of I want you to go off and solve this.
It's both the empowerment and the mindset, isn't it? Because the mindset is, yes, I need to solve this problem. I
Yes.
can solve this problem. I've been given permission to solve the problem. And yeah.
And giving people ownership of the problem as well,
Yeah.
and ownership of the
Yeah.
solution.
That's absolutely fantastic. Ben, I feel like there are so many things that we could explore and go further, and there's a whole topic around something that you call moral injury that I would love to explore with you, but I know that we don't really have time, and maybe we need to pick up a separate
Yeah.
conversation.
Moral injury, that's yeah. I mean, it would be great to do that. We could do a whole different podcast on that because it's especially more frequent. It used to be something that was being uniquely looked at in the military up until about the time of COVID. And I think there's scientific papers published on it pre-COVID, probably in the
Do you
dozens.
want to just give us a potted sort of overview of what it is?
Yeah. So moral injury is it's basically it's a breach of what you hold to be fundamentally or morally true. So it's a breach of your moral compass. So it's normally the element of if you've done something or been forced to do something or seen something happen that breaches your kind of moral compass. And I'm not to say something you think is slightly wrong, but something you think is absolutely fundamentally wrong. So the terminology came out from a guy who's a psychologist called Jonathan Shea, and he was working with Vietnam vets, and he was trying to treat these Vietnam vets with PTSD, and the PTSD was essentially untreatable. And he realized he'd seen in them a lot of these symptoms that he had read about. He liked the classics. He'd read about Achilles in the Iliad and display similar symptoms. Now, Achilles kind of one of the baddest warriors in literature, and he's not going to be suffering from PTSD, but he's got these sort of symptoms, and he started looking at what had caused these, and this is common in other sort of Greek tragedy as well. And so he turned this idea of moral injury, whereas kind of Achilles he'd left the Greek army because Agamemnon had basically taken away one of his war trophies, this slave. And I think an American had equated this to imagine if a soldier won the Congressional Medal of Honor, like Victoria Cross, and then his commander said, "Actually, no, I like that. I'm going to take it off the soldier's chest and he wears it instead." Or in the corporate environment. So a CEO gets a massive bonus and then has to pay tax on the bonus. "Oh, it's not fair. I'm going to pay the tax," and then takes everyone else's bonuses away from them to compensate the tax.
Yeah.
You're going to be pissed off. So basically, that's the kind of, I guess, the corporate equivalent. So it's this breach of what is morally right, and he started seeing this, and again, up until COVID, people were only really researching it in military context. So things like Vietnam, it's people seeing their friends killed because the government purchased the rifle from the lowest possible bidder. Perceptions of betrayal by politicians, things like that. Post COVID, people started seeing this in the medical community. So it's only medics making decisions on who lives or dies, but it being unduly influenced by the lack of resources. Politicians kind of weighing in with maybe policies that weren't the right policies. make a decision based on money because they don't have the number of not incubators, ventilators. And they started seeing this across the board. So there's been a lot of research going to it, and now to do more and more research in other elements. So community workers kind of making decisions on whether children stay with their parents. Are they forced to make what they see as a bad decision based on policy? Police dealing with difficult situations, corporate whistleblowers, things like Nestle. There's the issues in the 90s around baby milk. There's all sorts of things where they're seeing it and now realizing that, oh, this is the same.
Are there less extreme versions of it where it's maybe not a life or death decision or taking a child from their parents, but it's something that any of us might experience in a more day-to-day kind of situation?
I think moral injury isn't about life or death situations. So the PTSD is a fear-based reaction to a traumatic situation. Where moral injury, it's a breach of what you hold right. So it doesn't need to be life or death. And to be honest, if you're faced with taking someone's child
Mm,
away, I mean, that could be even more
mm,
traumatic
yep.
than it. I mean, that is life affecting. And I suspect we're going to see a huge ramp up in these cases after, especially Iraq and Afghanistan, because the number of people fighting in Afghanistan and then it gets handed back to the Taliban, that complete kind of political failure. And I think that's gonna have consequences in the future. And a lot of this takes time to come out. Jonathan Shea, he was dealing with Vietnam veterans. This was in the kind of 80s and 90s. So you're looking at people 20, 30 years after the events.
So what might moral injury look like for those of us working in a more corporate environment?
Things like breaches of ethics. So it might be something misuse of data. It might be selling a product that is not safe. I mean, in Fight Club, he describes car companies costing up how much it would be to do a safety recall, versus how much it would cost to pay off kind of injured or dead
Right.
relatives are dead. And if whichever one is
Right.
greater, you make your decision cost based. Now, that's obviously it's a film, a Fight Club, but apparently it's based on kind of real life examples in the 80s and 90s in car companies. So people being faced with companies that are making decisions that are either immoral or not balance with what they perceive as moral. Now, things like anxiety about the environment. It's again, if your moral compass is pointing towards minimizing climate change and you were working for someone like Shell, that could be quite damaging. You could be kind of setting yourself up for some form of moral injury in the future. But then again, people tend to go work for companies that align with what they hold to be true. If they don't, they're setting themselves up for potential problems in the future.
And this is a topic that you've written about, is that right?
Yes, so my wife, she was an academic. She was a classicist at Oxford. She's now just retrained to be a barrister. But yeah, we co-published a chapter in a book. So the book was called Paradox and Power in Caring Leadership, and we wrote this chapter as a conversation between the two of us. So looking at the differences in military leadership between so the ancient Greek world, so specifically around the Iliad, which my wife was an expert in, and my experiences in military. And also it led on to other interests. So she was quite heavily involved with various so especially in America, they read the classics a lot more than in UK, especially the Greek classics. And they've been doing lots of work with treating people with PTSD and moral injury through readings of the classics. So they would get actors in to read elements of the classics, especially around Ajax or around the Iliad, like treatment of Achilles, and then have group discussions with the soldiers and their families around what's going on there. And you'll see this all the way through. So you see lots of military symbols, and where you'll have Spartan helmets, and that whole kind of classical warrior ethos is quite highly valued in the military, especially in the American military. So reading with soldiers around these greatest heroes from history, Achilles and Ajax and Odysseus and people like that, and they went through exactly facing exactly the same things they are doing, and kind of showing their mental anguish. I mean, to the extent that Ajax and committing suicide, and show that they just because they're feeling this doesn't make them
Yeah.
any kind of
Yeah.
weak or any less of a
Yep.
warrior because of it,
Yeah.
because that's what Achilles was going through. So, and that's been quite a popular and powerful way of treatment. I think more so for the
Right.
American military.
Right. Thank you. We'll share a link to the book in the show notes, but, so it sounds amazing. I'll go and have a read of it myself too. Gosh, this has been absolutely fascinating conversation exploring so many different angles and depth of experience. Thank you so much. I want to ask a final question that I ask of all our podcast guests, which is speaking to you as a human, Ben. What's exciting you at the moment, and what are you looking forward to or motivated about, either in work or out of work, or both?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, the biggest thing for me now, family and kids. I've got 2 young kids who are growing up rapidly, and it's fun to be with them. It's fun watching them grow up, and they're everything for me now. And for me, a lot of me, that's taken over what my identity is now. And now, yeah, family and kids take priority of everything, including my career choices and what we do. So yeah, it's exciting time. So I think one is 10 and one's 6, and yeah, it's a great time. I guess the other thing that um, I've gone from all these adrenaline sports, skydiving, fast motorbikes, and I've got rid of all of that. So now it's completely different perceptions of risk. So kids in high vis and lots of flashing lights on the bike. My big personal development, I work on calisthenics now. So after years of running around kind of army style training and then doing that for years after the army, suddenly realized I'm really bored of running. I'm really bored of gyms. So I started calisthenics, which is more about kind of using your body to train. So lots of things like human flags and front levers and hand balancing, and that keeps me entertained because it's something fun and interesting again. There's lots of skill based, and so I've been working on that for years now, and got a couple of things I want to achieve before I'm 50. Yes, that keeps me motivated. I guess work wise and general interest wise, AI. I'm doing a lot of work with AI and uses it at work, and I really enjoy working with some of the frontline engineers and the line managers, and just all the incredible ways they're finding to use it and make their lives easier, and make everyone's around them lives easier. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. So much to unpack there. But yeah, well, amazing. Thank you so much. I've genuinely really enjoyed this conversation. It's been so thought provoking. There are lots of other avenues that we could have gone down and explored. But, thank you so much for the time. And it's been an absolute joy to talk with you, and really fascinating, intriguing, thought provoking to hear the stories that you've got from your background. Thank you.
Well, likewise, yeah, very enjoyable, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, I hope that listeners have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Please do like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And bye for now.